Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where we are entering August, which is not only a traditionally slow period when it comes to movie news, but there's no big movie this year to even help the front end of August. Like before we had Guardians of the Galaxy and Suicide Squad, and we could talk about the sequels and all the headlines that would come out of that film's release. But this year we just have The Dark Tower, which isn't looking too good. They haven't even scheduled a press screening yet. In short, this is a great time of year to ask viewer questions because I have 3 stories for today, but I suspect going forward that we will have episodes where I have space for more than one viewer question. So if there's been one that you've been meaning to ask, now is the time. And if I don't answer it the next day, that doesn't mean I haven't taken it aside and earmarked it for a future episode. I do that sometimes. All right, so anyway, as I said, I do have 3 stories for the day. And the first one I was disappointed to see was a headline in the first place. And that's why I want to discuss it. Although to be fair, I don't like that other people are using it, yet it's also my first headline. And I think the reason it got so much traction over the weekend was because we've heard whisperings before that Tilda Swinton was, up for the role of Pennywise in the It remake. But it got a burst of energy over the weekend. And I suspect, because it is such a slow movie news time, that everybody was like, something to discuss. And so everybody jumped on it. And I believe the story originated in Vanity Fair, which was talking about a set visit they did. And they said they were talking to producer Barbara Muschetti. I'll talk about her in a moment. And she said, you know who our first choice was for Pennywise, who we instinctually wanted? Tilda Swinton. But unfortunately, her scheduling wouldn't allow it, so we didn't even audition her. But I think to wistfully think about what could have been is really not fair to Bill Skarsgård, who has uphill battle as it is trying to erase Tim Curry's performance of the character from people's memories. So why would you throw another thing in there to be like, oh, well, if you don't like Bill, Tilda was who we really wanted. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if they're like hedging their bets. Maybe they're worried about living up to the hype. But I think that's like damage control. I wouldn't do it before the movie came out. So the first thing I want to talk about is Barbara Muschetti. And what the heck is she doing? Why did no one tell her? I mean, as a producer, she should know better not to undercut her own movie, right? So when I first heard the name, because of course the film was directed by Andy Muschietti, who's Americanized himself. He's been credited as Andre Muschietti for quite some time. They're from Argentina. But anyway, I assumed that was his wife. But it actually turns out that it's his sister, and she produces his movies. And I think that this is really a shame that women producers continue to be wives and sisters and therefore extensions of their brothers and husbands who are the director. They're not there so much to have their own opinions and to contribute to the films personally, but to back up the guy in their life, right? And I think that that really is a disservice to the production, because I think that one of the benefits of filmmaking being a team business is that you have a lot of different opinions at play while the film is being made. And the thing is that film is a mass market business. It has to have mass market appeal. It's not like fine art where I've said this before, fine art, you need just one person to be like, you know what, to me that's worth a couple mil. You're done. But you have to sell a lot of movie tickets for a movie to be successful. So it's great to have a number of people weighing in when you're making the film so that you have the best chance of appealing to a large swath of people, right? You never want a producer who's going to help the director have tunnel vision, right? Like, oh, I have a great idea. Everybody leave me alone and let me execute it. I think it's important, particularly for the producer, to challenge the director and say, well, is it commercial? Are you doing the best thing here? What about this? We have to remember the bottom line and that not everybody has the same opinion or viewpoint, and you might be, getting a bunch of people out of the picture. And also, ideally, keeping people from making comments about how you would have preferred to have Tilda Swinton in your movie. As we get more female, we've talked about the problem with female directors and that they don't continue to build careers like we hoped they would, like their male counterparts. They always go niche, right away after they've had a success. We talked about that with Patty Jenkins last week. And so just as we worry about what's going, and also they have a need to employ their husbands, which really slows them down. I'm not saying you can't help your husband out, but you can executive produce his project and then go continue on your own path. There's no reason that you have to be so intimately involved that it takes your career in a different path than where it's headed. So that's also Patty Jenkins, and we've also talked about that with Melissa McCarthy. But anyway, I think Kathleen Kennedy is the only truly independent female producer working these days, but it's worth noting that she started out as someone's wife. You know, she was Steven Spielberg's assistant. He upped her to producer, but she was never a producer by herself on his movies. She worked with Frank Marshall, who she married, and they were a producing team. He started out as a producer. She started out as an assistant. And often when you hire your assistant to produce your movies, it's because you want a producer you can control. So she was kind of like Steven Spielberg's work wife, and I'm sure you've heard that term. Often people, guys in particular, and women will use it with like work and home husbands. You know, someone who's supposed to support you and look out for you. You know, at home it's your actual spouse, but at work it's your work spouse. It's a common saying. So I'm glad that Kathleen Kennedy eventually evolved into her own juggernaut. Even if we have problems with her, I think that it's important to recognize what she has accomplished in terms of women in Hollywood. So anyway, Tilda Swinton, of course, if I were her, maybe she didn't even have a scheduling conflict, but was like, hey, I don't want another Doctor Strange controversy, so I'm busy, right? That's what I would do. She was very good as the Ancient One, but it was a problem to not only race bend the character, but to gender bend the character. It was a double whammy. And as good as she was really good. Of course, she took that role from a male Asian actor who could have also, I'm sure, potentially have knocked it out of the park. We're going to talk about male Asian actors in just a moment, though, at the second story in a positive way in terms of development. But, you know, that was a difficult situation, and I don't know why she would want to revisit it. And I see no reason to gender bend Pennywise. I mean, to be fair, Tilda Swinton made her name, a name for herself in Hollywood with Orlando and gender bending, you know, personally herself. But I just think that Pennywise, you know, not everything has to be messed with, right? I just don't think it's necessary. One of the things that you guys said that I thought was great about Bill Skarsgård's It is that it's like Heath Ledger trying to take over for Jack Nicholson in the role of the Joker. And considering the attention that was paid to the first It miniseries in 1990 and now this new remake, it's a very prestigious role. And it's also a clown, an evil clown. How interesting is that? But it would be wonderful if Bill Skarsgård could accomplish something at that level, what Heath Ledger was able to do, to have two iconic performances that stand on their own. He was very good in Atomic Blonde, as I said in my review. I thought he really captured my attention with a small role. And I think that his brother Alexander Skarsgård has made very strong choices, very strong charismatic choices. So I'm rooting for Bill, and I hate to see him undercut like this just weeks before the movie comes out. It comes out September 8th. It's very close. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Then the second story of the day is that, speaking of casting, Dwayne Johnson's Skyscraper is beginning to fill out its cast. This is a big movie, not only for him, but I believe it's a Universal movie. But it's, you know, it could be a potentially big box office earner because it's so it's a Chinese, basically a co-production. It's shooting in China. It's basically Die Hard in China. But instead of him being, you know, John McClane, off-duty police officer who has to take down a bunch of, you know, European terrorists, or actually thieves. I don't want to give away the ending of Die Hard if for some reason you haven't seen it. It's amazing. A fabulous script, by the way. A fabulous action script. That thing is lean and mean. It's brilliant. Very well directed. One of the best action, just actually movies ever made. But anyway, Dwayne Johnson plays someone who's a former military person. He also a hostage negotiator, but he also does safety for skyscrapers. And on one such inspection, an explosion happens in the skyscraper, and he's not only trying to rescue people, but of course has been framed for the explosion. I think this is his best bet to recapture his San Andreas box office glory, which has given him his current, you know, positioning in Hollywood. I think he's very close to having fully squandered it. We'll see. I liked Central Intelligence quite a bit, and it's the same writer-director on this movie because it's his script. You would think he would get the San Andreas guy back. They're working on something else. But we'll see. I think that Dwayne Johnson is just as close to being overexposed, kind of like Mark Wahlberg, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, I think the cast is turning out quite nicely. So Pablo Schreiber joined the cast. That was a big headline over the weekend. He, of course, was from 13 Hours, but also recently American Gods. I would bet you money he's the bad guy. However, I would love it to be Neve Campbell, who also joined the cast, because that would be very interesting indeed. And she was great on the recent seasons of House of Cards. I thought she did a really nice job. It's time for Neve Campbell to come back, right? You know, you can always maybe come back, and I think she is doing a nice job doing it slowly but steady. And then also they've added Chin Han to the movie, which I think is fabulous. He, of course, was in one of my favorite sequences in The Dark Knight, the Hong Kong extraction. And he was also in Ghost in the Shell as Togasa. You know, blink and you miss him. I didn't even make the connection that was the same actor because I think he looked so weird. He looked almost like a weird Ken doll with the way they had that ill-fitting suit on him and the thing they put around his neck, which was also weird because Togusa was the most technologically unadvanced of the group. So I don't know what was going on there. But I'm so happy that he's going to have a major role in the film. That's very exciting. Hopefully it'll be in a heroic sense. And of course he's there to appeal to the Chinese audience where they want this film to do very well. But, the benefit is that you have a major American movie with a major, Chinese lead. I don't know if Chin Han actually is a Chinese actor, but he's from the region. But Daniel Wu, I want to point out that you're going to be seeing this happening in a couple of movies. For instance, the upcoming Tomb Raider. Let's see how this goes over and if they actually do it. But so far it's been reported that Daniel Wu from the Badlands on AMC, and other things, but he's going to be the male lead in Tomb Raider opposite Alicia Vikander and Walton Goggins as the villain. But for him to be the male lead is a very big deal. So kudos to Daniel Wu and Chin Han for moving forward like that. That's fabulous. John Cho is like, I missed my window. I became, that guy who's in movies that bomb. Damn it, I'm only Sulu. But anyway, we'll see what happens. So anyway, that's the second story of the day. The third story is that Bleecker Street picked up a film that I think sounds pretty good, but I thought it was worth talking about. And also, it's a slow news cycle. So anyway, Bleecker Street, I've said they've never released a bad film. And I think that's still kind of true, although my confidence in them was shaken just a little bit with Logan Lucky, which I think was still a good movie, but it wasn't as good as I had thought it was going to be based on the trailers. And also, it is getting overall very positive reviews. So maybe you'll feel differently if you didn't have expectations quite as high as mine, as I admitted in my review. But Logan Lucky wasn't at the level, I think, of like Pawn Sacrifice and the other films I've seen from Bleecker Street. So anyway, they've just acquired another film, and I hope this puts them back in like, oh, you always release great movies, Bleecker Street. So this is going to be Jon Hamm and Rosamund Pike. Where the heck has Rosamund Pike been? She made that United Kingdom movie about a very important instance of interracial marriage in the UK, one of the first ones, first prominent ones. But that didn't really go anywhere, unfortunately. And it's really weird that she hasn't been able to get anything post Gone Girl. Like, why didn't she get the Sharon Stone bounce after Basic Instinct, right? What happened? She was so fabulous in that movie. I think maybe because she was pregnant during the publicity for it and award season. And it's interesting because I was talking, Catherine Zeta-Jones came up in a conversation I was having, and I was thinking about mulling over my notes for this. I'd just recently written them down. And I was like, she too was pregnant during her Chicago ad campaign and the award season, and she actually was like very pregnant when she accepted her Oscar. And since Hollywood's so image conscious, did that hurt both of them and anyone thinking to sign them during that very crucial moment? Casey Affleck has also complained about that, saying he had to have that horrible scraggly beard for his Manchester by the Sea run because of a role that he was, that was for a role. And, he hasn't picked up a lot of stuff either. So it's interesting, but he has other complications, of course, with, some of the accusations that have been made against him. And to some people, they're very serious. So, but it's interesting. I think that's something to reflect on, that you have to make sure you're really well positioned to sell yourself during that time when you're in the spotlight if you want to get a bounce off of a movie. But anyway, this is called High Wire Act, and it was written by Tony Gilroy, who wrote the Bourne movies. And you're like, how the heck has this been on the table since Cannes last year? So this has been on the table for a year. But then you see that the director is Brad Anderson. Tony Gilroy, by the way, of course, also fixed Rogue One quite well. But Brad Anderson is a director who's been around for a long time. He made a splash with the horror film Session 9 way back in 2001. Everybody was talking about him, but he's been struggling to break through ever since. He never made good on the initial promise of his career. So let's see if he does here. So Jon Hamm's also had a difficult time. Mad Men came out 10 years ago, and I think he still has never really totally transitioned into a star, which is weird considering he was so crucial to the focal point of that show. Although nobody on that show has really, I think, gone past it. It's tough. It's tough. As we said, it's very hard to transition out of television. Even people on Breaking Bad, like Bryan Cranston, he's around, but he's just around. Also, by the way, I recently watched Free Fire, and I thought that Armie Hammer, who was in that movie's not great. I wouldn't waste my time with it. But Armie Hammer has actually a similar kind of he's like the blonde Jon Hamm. Like they're lighter and darker versions of the same kind of guy in terms of not only their looks, but their voice, their speech pattern, and they're having similar problems getting work. So I thought that was interesting. But anyway, High Wire Act, Jon Hamm plays a U.S. diplomat who returns to Beirut in the 1980s, a decade after his wife was killed there, but he has to come back to help the CIA on a mission that only he can help them with. And Rosamund Pike is one of the agents, and the other, speaking of Breaking Bad, is Dean Norris, of course, the police officer who was chasing Walter White for all those seasons. So that sounds pretty good to me. I gotta be honest with you, it sounds a little like a rental, but maybe they can do something. You know, Tony Gilroy's, I think, actually, interestingly enough, the biggest name on that thing, and so let's see. But I mean, I've seen some pretty bad Tony Gilroy projects too, so let's see how this one looks when we get a trailer. All right, so the viewer question comes from Movies Make My Day. What a great name. And Movies Make My Day says, hey, Grace, I have a question. What qualifies a movie as an award contender? I'd expect a film like The Big Sick, Mother, or even Suburbicon to qualify, but Wonder Woman felt like a popcorn movie to me. No doubt an excellent one. Is it the tone of the film or the hype? I love your videos and watch them every single day. Thank you. And so basically, you know, there was a lot of talk that Warner Brothers is planning a very big awards push for Wonder Woman. You know, similar to what they did when the film came out, when they were like, women power, girl power. You know, they only focused on Patty Jenkins and Gal Gadot. And I feel very bad for Chris Pine and Alan Heinberg, who were crucial to the, you know, the success of the movie and really contributed quite a bit. And even Jeff Johns, who also helped shape it. And, you know, those guys, you know, I know it doesn't fit the narrative, but, you know, if they don't want to have a backlash, I think it would be a bad idea to just completely pretend that no men contributed to this film when they didn't. Not only did they contribute, but they contributed in significant ways. But anyway, that's your answer. The reason that Wonder Woman can be an awards contender is because of a couple of things. Well, first of all, a game changer. A game changer movie can qualify. The Dark Knight, for instance, you know, still infamous for not getting more nominations and forever changed the rules. They're still struggling with how to try and get more blockbusters in the mix. Mad Max was very much in the mix, I think, because of the artistry of that film. And also, as you might recall last year, Deadpool had a shot at being a Best Picture nominee, and I felt that it should have been because of what it managed to accomplish in the month of February with an R-rated, you know, superhero character who breaks the fourth wall, Ryan Reynolds' ability to tap into pop culture so much. I thought that deserved at least a nomination. Now, I'm not saying Wonder Woman should win, but I can see it being worthy of some nominations. Nominations in of themselves are very valuable because forever you can write on the box office. I mean, you can write on the little box of the video or the little avatar on iTunes, Oscar-nominated film, right? And Suicide Squad is an Oscar-winning film for makeup and hair, and I think it totally deserves that. But anyway, the other thing that makes Wonder Woman a game changer is that it's a female superhero movie directed by a woman. That's a big deal. And then also the World War I angle, in retrospect, was very clever because I think for awards season it makes the film seem a little more serious, right? So you get all these older voters and they're like, I don't know if I should vote for a superhero movie. And you're like, oh, it's a period piece and it takes place with, pre-Nazis, right? The Germans, and, you know, we're dealing with all this stuff and they're in the trenches and they're like, okay, and she saves a town in France and they're like, maybe I can kind of see it. It's got some spy aspects to it, you know, maybe I can go along with it, right? So it makes it a little more palatable. So that's very clever, actually. Also, I think that to me, what makes Wonder Woman so important is that it helped usher in the new wave of feminism. And it was accepted by audiences. Like, that's so great. Like, it was like, as I've said many times, this idea of women just wanting to be equals and have some skin in the game instead of wanting to take over the game. I thought that was really fabulous, and I thought they did such a good job presenting it, and then to have a success factor shows that we're on the right path finally with how women are depicted in film. And women, how they make movies. And I just thought that was really fabulous. I still think promoting movies is a mess because, again, they're being really mean to the guys who contributed quite significantly to this film. But we'll see how it will do. It has a lot of mainstream competition this year, and we're not even done with the year. But so far, Beauty and the Beast accomplished the same thing, and I think a musical is an easier sell to the Academy voters. And then also Get Out accomplished quite a bit, for a different demographic, and that's going to be pushing very hard. So I don't know how Wonder Woman will be able to fare. We'll see what the ad campaign looks like, and we'll see how Patty Jenkins is looking by the time award season rolls around. We have we got a month or two until they have to really start campaigning in earnest, and, where's that Wonder Woman 2 deal? How far will she be into her TV show? Don't forget that Matthew McConaughey, I think one of the reasons that he won Best Actor for the Dallas Buyers Club is that True Detective, where he was, I think, arguably even better than he was in Dallas Buyers Club, was playing at the time on HBO, and everybody was talking about him and voting, and, he was, I think that did a lot to get him that win, than just the movie that he won for. So it's really important, to plan these things, and we'll see what shape Wonder Woman is in at the time that matters. All right, so I hope that answers your question. Movies make my day. Thank you so much for asking it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please write down below, you think today's top 3 stories, movies make my days, viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Again, this is the time to ask, because it's a really slow movie news cycle. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.